So without further ado, let's get started with this program. You guys got to know each other in the crowd, got to eat some tacos, get some drinks, but now we're going to get serious. We have two luminaries with us. Right before us, right here in these beautiful Corinthian leather chairs. That are going to take us through a journey on what we may expect tomorrow and the next day and the next year and whatnot. What's in store for the future of technology? What's important? What's not important? What should we not give a shit about? What should we continue to think about, dwell upon? Right to my far left is Mr. Gary Shapiro. Gary is President and CEO of the Consumer Technology Association. That's the group that's responsible for a little get-together called CES, which you may have heard of. Gary's also an award-winning author, written 2 books, which you may have read. One's called Ninja Innovation, 10 Killer Strategies of the World's Most Successful Businesses. Do you still have the squeezies from Ninja Squeezies?
I was just playing with one today.
There you go. Get a book. You might get a squeegee. Also, the combat combination will restore the American dream. Gary's pretty prolific on all sides of technology. You might have read some of his words in the Wall Street Journal last week, where he brought up the biggest show on the fence. Losing ground with regard to driverless cars and how the states are picking up for their slack. Also in USA Today and other places. So Gary knows what he's talking about. And then we have Andy Grignon.
Yeah.
Andy, you may have heard of before as one of the lead architects and engineers on the original iPhone, working hand in hand with Steve Jobs. Maybe? Steve has some pretty colorful language on how we refer to Andy. We'll let him refer to get back on that one. He started a company soon after with some other Apple engineers called Quick Labs. Had some sort of exit or whatnot that we're not sure of.
Yeah, and Jobs is still here.
He's still here. I missed that one. And now you're with Siberia San Francisco, which we'd like to learn a little bit about, so we can talk a little bit about that too. So, you guys been started with the conversation? After these guys kind of hashed it out, we're going to pass the mic around. This is like an interactive forum. I want you guys to be a part of the conversation, so let's open it up to the room and everybody has the opportunity to chime in afterwards, okay? Sound good? You guys happy?
Yep.
That's good? Okay.
Yes.
What did you do this? It's gross. I don't know.
Sorry.
I don't know. The mic's a little crazy. Whatever.
I have all these questions.
You got a lot of questions. All right. So, you guys haven't been here, or have you? You guys have been to one of these things before. You know this works. It's highly interactive. You know, the last thing I want to do, or I think Gary want to do, is just sit here and jibber jabber. I mean, you know, like.
Can't hear you.
You can't hear me. All right. Yeah. You know those toys where you can like turn the knob on the front and pull the fucking thing on the back, and we'll just go. That's what the fuck's gonna happen. And if you guys can step in and ask questions, this is really interactive. So hit us with anything. Okay. So that works out pretty well. What do you? What the fuck is the future of technology? All right. So you just wrote this piece on self-driving cars. I'm actually, I'll be honest, I'm actually, fairly bullish on self-driving things. I think it maybe have blown overboard a little bit with, did you guys see the comma announcement, the TechCrunch Disrupt? Did anyone see that?
No.
It was a self-driving thing. It's probably going to be at CES. It's this kid who was the first iPhone hacker. He jailbroke the very first iPhone. He was supposed to write Elon Musk's version of self-driving cars. He did it all by himself. They had kind of a weird parting of ways, and then he made this company called Comma.ai. Just closed a big round of funding and had the quintessential Silicon Valley introduction of his company. As they made fun of us, on Silicon Valley HBO, he did the perfect introduction that epitomized that. However, I think his product is actually pretty good.
What is it?
So what it is, it's a thing. It's a thing that replaces your mirror on the front of your car. and it uses the existing sensors and the existing control of your Toyota or whatever the fuck else. It's like 2 cars, right? And it completely controls the car autonomously. So he's been doing this now for 6 months, something like that. It
He's
goes
9
on
years
sale. He's what?
9 years old.
He's like a kid. I don't know. He's not 9, you know, whatever. He's got a thing that is going on sale. He's probably going to be at CES. But I think that's actually a pretty interesting step. What that showed was somebody who had no real market viability, no real cash, and he created a product where that was a thing. I'm sorry. I'm not tired very much. All right, sorry. No, you know, but this is a kid that made something really interesting off of kind of what we prize as Silicon Valley venture capitalists. He made a big thing out of no real money. Whether it's going to be successful or not is up for the market to decide. But you wrote a piece around this is. Yeah, this mic's fucked, dude. So in terms of where we actually have to. Are you fucking kidding me?
Really loud.
Design challenge.
Actually, no. There we go. You know, so to me, what that's actually saying is, how do we actually create products? I think this is one of the first most viable products that has come out of Silicon Valley in a long time. We're going to see how that actually plays out because it's an actual piece of hardware that you can buy for $1,000 that is going to self-drive your car. Now, will people actually do it? I don't know. I think, you know, when we went out to your last thing, yes, that's how we know it. Scoble and Robert Scoble, myself, and another friend of ours, Sam Levin, Mercedes gave us a self-driving car. And we drove that thing, and it was weird as hell. I don't know if you guys saw this, but there was a kid in Russia who, when the S-Class first came out, got one of these cars, found out that the way you normally have to drive this thing is with 2 hands on the wheel, right? It detects wetness, effectively. And he found out that if you can electrically tape a can of soda to the sensor on the steering wheel, you can trick it. So this is, again, in the early days. This isn't even like Tesla hasn't done their thing. This is a year ago. He posted this very infamous video on YouTube where he put a GoPro looking at him. It is the only person driving a car on the Autobahn. Sets it all up, tapes the can to the steering wheel, gets the fuck out at freeway speeds, climbs into the back seat, and then he just sits there and he lets the car drive itself on the fucking Autobahn with the software that you get off of an off-the-shelf S-Class today. That's the same thing we took to your thing. I don't know that I would do that, but so that happened. Do you want to talk about that?
Glory to parallel universes. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming. I'm Gary. So, I'm standing out for the people back so you can see me because I'm not as big bald. So, today, if you want to buy something, you want to own something, you have 2 choices, right? You can go to a retailer, and you can buy it, or you can get it online, and it'll be delivered to you, and there's some permutations you can call it. That's it, right? In the future, there'll be 3 more ways if you want something. One of them, driverless car will come and drop it off. Anybody have an idea of the other 2? Drones! $5 right to you. Yes. So drones could drop it off. Obviously, this microphone is up there, the leading words. The F word is fine, the D word is not. So, drones. All right, what else?
Robots?
3D printing right there. And then you got 3D printing your own. So, the future, with great certainty, also has 3 other choices at least. In terms of how we'll get stuff that we want, we desire, we need. That's the great news. The cooler news is in terms, because this is talking about the future, and I can spend a lot of time talking about driverless cars. I spend a lot of time thinking about it. We have a lot of the companies for those that don't know, we're a trade association. We're based in Washington, D.C. We represent 2,400 technology companies in North America, and we actually produce a CES, we produce an event in Asia called CES Asia. We're producing an event in Paris next month and in Prague. And we do events as well. We have one in Silicon Valley. If you're interested, in the next 3 days, starts Tuesday morning in what hotel? Fairmont, thank you. And that's a lot of startups will be there. We do a lot of other things. And we focus on innovation. That's who we are and what we do. Our whole mission is about innovation. And it's about disruptive innovation. We have Airbnb, and Lyft, and Uber, and Pandora, and Google, you name it. They're all members of ours. And we do that because we are passionate about innovation, changing things, making things better. So we look at the future, what we think about is the 5 different ways of getting things. And we also spend a lot of time talking about the cloud, and we talk about big data analysis and where things are going. And what we do is we fight, frankly, in Washington, in states, in cities, for the right of people to innovate. And that is our whole mission. So that was a 60-second commercial. Now, did you have a question?
Yeah.
I want. That's this guy.
I wanted to deep, since driverless vehicles are like the subject of the day. Everybody's talking about it. Pittsburgh, just Uber in Pittsburgh, that's big news. This is the future, right? There's so many implications with regard to what's in front of us. Let's start with the liability issues.
So before we go into that, here's the thing. Oh, Jesus. So, a good buddy of mine, I live over on the coast in Half Bay, and we've got a bunch of us weirdos who all live out there, and this guy, he does a really great job. He sold his company, so he's got a lot of money to do stupid ideas and projects. So he took his Tesla, so he's a hacker, right? He takes his Tesla, and he hacked it. So, because he wanted to, actually funny enough, it started off, he wanted to do the douchiest Silicon Valley thing that he could do. So he made a video where he tied his Tesla into his Alexa thing, right? Alexa Echo. And he wrote a service which allowed his Tesla, using the auto driving skills, to back the car out of his driveway. So he said, Alexa, the skill's name was Kit, he said, Alexa, tell Kit to back the car out of my driveway, my garage. And so that tied into his home automation system. So what you have is a great video of a drone, douchey, remember, a drone shooting the video from like outside of his garage that shows him saying the thing. The garage door opens, the car backs out, and the garage door closes. That's all he did. With that one video, Michigan policymakers put that as a thing for why this should be a felony. Hacking on your car should be a felony. So, from his civic responsibility, we actually have, this is the typical hacker, people trying to push the line forward, along with the resistance for people wanting to kind of hold it back. The reasoning behind something like that, introducing this legislature, was they don't want to have the ability to say, hey, turn off Alex's brakes now, whatever the fuck you would do while they're driving around, whatever it is. Like, that's the fear, because that's the way people see new technology. Having a nerd who can open his garage door and back his car out, we're all just like, oh, fuck, yeah, that's great. But really, there's a large number of the population that doesn't see it that way. They see it kind of from a fear-driven model more than an innovative model. And I think innovation, in a lot of respects, here it comes.
I spent the last 5 days and woke up in Michigan. That's where my kids and my wife are. So you've taken out Michigan. In California, on the other hand,
also I went to Iowa, so Michigan go
in California, it's the only state in the country where you must have a sentient human driver when there's a driverless vehicle ready to take over. In Michigan and in Arizona and Nevada, you don't need a live sentient human being. Because you know what? Google with their self-driving cars, did some experiments with their own employees. They said, we want you to stay up front there with the car and pay attention. And you know what they found with cameras in the car? They found out that employees were falling asleep, they weren't paying attention.
Under the penalty of losing their jobs, which they actually signed a piece of paper saying, I can be dismissed if I am not having.
Right, so the point is self-driving cars actually free people. And the disabled community is so excited about driverless cars. And in California, they don't like the legislation because the truth is, having a sentient driver you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't fall asleep, you can't be disabled, you can't be elderly, to the point where you can't, and it's a false sense of security because the ability to take over a car in an emergency situation, you have to be alert all the time, and that's not going to happen.
No.
So the future is, and the reason that driverless cars are important is, yeah, it's going to be fun to just sit back and enjoy commuting without dealing with rush hour traffic, but 35,000 people die every year in the United States. Hundreds of thousands are injured because of car accidents, most of which, overwhelmingly, over 90% are caused by human error. If we can end 90% of that, that's worth it alone. Now, going against that, there are issues which I'll actually answer the question, which is about liability. We'll resolve that. Yeah, there's some tough questions. Do you hit the kid or do you hit the driver next to you? And there'll be logic, it'll be worked out. Like we've dealt with nuclear power plants, we've dealt with other things. You come out with the rules of the road and you agree on them, and it sounds harsh and cruel, but there will be a way of protecting. But what we can't do, this is what I was in the Wall Street Journal about a few weeks ago, is that there was, believe it or not, one of my best friends who was head of the National Transportation Safety Board, a 2-star general, was saying, this must be like autopilot in airplanes. It must be perfect. And I'm like, no, it's never going to be perfect, not in my lifetime, but it'll be pretty damn good. And you have to compare those 35,000 lives and saving a lot of those versus this unreachable goal of perfect. And the reason it can't be perfect, I know San Francisco has pretty consistent weather and signage and things like that, but in a lot of the country, especially the northern parts, it snows, there's ice, there's blizzards, signs are covered, lane markings are covered. There's all sorts of weather-related things. Other situations arise where you're not going to have perfect. You'll have really damn good. And you can't always have a driver that takes over. And it's just like it's been proven that with Uber and Lyft in an area, drunken driving goes down. So too with driverless cars. And we're already getting there. Some of you probably have cars already that do active collision avoidance. They have lane departure warnings. They can even park themselves. We are getting there very quickly. The challenge we will face is not the legal issue of liability. The challenge we're going to face is overzealous legislators who are trying to make the great be the enemy of the good.
Define an acceptable level of death?
So it actually
Less than 35,000 a year.
You've got to legislate an acceptable level.
Acceptable level of death is if we could dramatically cut down the death rate.
That's very difficult.
And that's actually, so did you see, MIT actually did a really interesting experiment. MIT Media Lab did a really cool thing, which was, they did a quiz online. It's still available. So you can, what would you do in this particular situation? And they set up the situation, it's a self-driving car, and number of people are going to die, and you're choosing who dies under certain circumstances. Because these are the same kinds of things that software has to make decisions on. Who dies? And this goes back to the liability question, this goes back to all sorts of other things. And of course, you're like, oh, of course I want to minimize that. And then they start to introduce all sorts of, kind of weird things like, there's a dog that's going to die, there's an old person, there's a young person, and it introduces our own cognitive bias, because it turns out there's no one right answer for all of it, right? It's like, oh shit, I saved the dog and killed the old guy and did this, all this shit that was just awful. But the reason why they constructed these scenarios is to examine these kinds of
The insurance companies already signed the value of life.
They have.
They do, and think about auto insurance companies, they're going to lose big time in all this because the number of collisions which will go down. But think about it, we had the same analysis 120 years ago when we were talking about the introduction of the car. It never would have happened. First of all, you wouldn't be asking, if you ask people what they want, they would say faster horses that don't poop as much, They'd say they don't want cars. And actually, most consumer research now shows that people aren't dying for cars. We've actually released some research this week. So if you ask the questions differently, do you want to avoid deaths from aggressive drivers and drunken drivers? Do you want to help disabled people? They say, oh yeah, of course, yes, overwhelmingly. Especially, by the way, younger people really want everything. So it's how you ask the questions, and then people don't know what they don't know. You didn't know that you wanted a microwave oven or a remote control or the internet. You didn't know that because the questions could be. It's the same thing with the car. So when I hear about liability, that's what, it's not really an issue. It'll be resolved.
Oh, sorry.
So, what happens? You're talking about insurance companies. We're talking about insurance companies, possibly losing their shirts on this whole deal. What happens to municipalities? What happens to town revenues that go down because of auto traffic citations are minimized because of auto tolls?
Is it auto what?
The fact that the people are making the law, yeah, there are less tickets, therefore less revenue for towns. And that's a big issue.
Oh, that's terrible.
It's real.
It may be real, but the truth is, there's no one more interested at this point than municipalities because they're dealing with traffic issues. They want smart cities. They're dealing with congestion is one of the biggest complaints they have. And they want to figure out how to get there. I mean, look, there was a competition recently to become a smart city for they got a few $1 million, I think, but there was 90 or 100 cities that compete for one prize and only one got it.
Yep.
I mean, so cities want this. City planners want it. They hate traffic. And so think about how it'll cut down on traffic. Think about how it'll affect ownership of cars. I mean, ownership of cars is going to change dramatically. Right now, 90% of the time, our cars aren't being used.
Yeah, so I was just over in Paris. I got a little dog and pony. The city of Paris is trying to show off how cool their startup ecosystem is to Silicon Valley people. And when you go in, my bias, of course, was just Paris is just overloaded with over-governance and all taxes and all the reason why you don't hire people from Paris is because it's difficult to fire them, all the things, right? And so they went and systematically attacked all of this. But what they have to do is look at how do city governments get in the way. And Paris has taken this to heart, which is surprising, to the effect that we as San Francisco have, I think in some areas, less lax. More restrictive. Paris is less lax in compared to us in some of the things that they're allowed to do. But so the government has to have an active participation in this. We don't get to do all this stuff as nerds on our own. Good.
I think the bigger issue from liability and reduced revenues, because in a way there'll be reduced revenues, but there'll also be reduced need for trains and buses and things like that. So that costs a lot of taxpayer money. But the biggest issue, I think, is going to be the loss of jobs. That's going to be the real touching point for everything.
Yeah. So, yes. So what's, all right, I've got a couple ways. You actually had an answer to the question that was asked, I'm sure.
No, I actually
agree with
you. The biggest issue that society, not only our country, but especially other countries are faced with driving is a larger percentage of employment in our country, is the issue of jobs. Now, my friends have assured me that every time that innovations come along, new jobs are created, old jobs are lost, like we're doing with Uber and Airbnb and hundreds of other companies that are disrupted. But this, to me, is different. I don't know why. And and if you look far into the future with robotics and other technologies that are coming along, and the Internet of Things, connecting things, predicting things, there will be a time in history, I can't say when actual jobs that are productive and require thought may go down dramatically. And the question isn't, can we as human beings get along with each other?
My stick?
It's directional.
How can, the machines are taking on the mind. How can we as human beings get along with each other when we're not gainfully employed? Will we have the self-worth to cooperate with each other as we do?
Well, society needs to change, reduce the number of hours that is normal.
Absolutely. There's so many changes that have to occur, but I don't think that's a reason not to do something. Like when the trains came along and they kept the caboose on, they kept the guy who ran the caboose, feather bedding. That's dumb. So to block innovation and societal change because you're affecting jobs, to me, is not a good excuse. I mean, even if you have people dig holes and fill them or do something else, but we always need, and then there's the whole concept of culture and pursuing what you want. You can create a lot of, whether it's beautification, there's so many things. And the other thing is we are aging phenomenally as a society. There's not enough people in the United States to take care of ourselves getting older. So there are jobs out there that will be different types of jobs.
Right now, one of the things I saw, I just met this last week, the U.S.
This is better.
The U.S. Digital Service was here earlier this week, and I did a little thing with them. These are the people that parachuted in after healthcare.gov, shit the bed at the $1 billion sped in a website that didn't work. And they took a minuscule budget and they recreated it. They actually did a really phenomenal job. It worked so well that they decided to replicate that pattern to the rest of government. And it's actually pretty remarkable. It reports directly to the president, they all sorts of interesting stuff. These are people who are signing up from Silicon Valley to fulfill a sense of civic duty to create things. The only reason I bring that up is because elimination of jobs, you look again back at countries like Paris, where you have people who literally just dig a hole and then they build a hole. Like, that's a bullshit job. And I think what we should do is have capital, intellectual capital, deployed on solving some kind of interesting problems. Like, one of the interesting things, do you guys know the organization Code for America?
Yeah.
A really cool thing, right? And what they do is they release people to solve citizens to solve problems of the government. And they wrote a really cool app in the city of Boston, which just, you downloaded it on your thing, and it would just measure accelerometer impacts as you're driving. And it would record that as a pothole, and after a certain number of the population, hit a certain pothole in a certain spot, data-driven, they would send a crew out to go fix the pothole. Like, it's a stupid, simple thing, but as nerds, we all see that as like, well, that's it, they have an accident. And, but that's a smarter allocation of intellectual and resources, and it didn't cost any money. And I think there's just ways that we can work smarter instead of just, like, adding lots of jobs and covering our business. Sorry, you gotta think the same.
So, given that we're talking about the elimination of jobs, I'm sure you're familiar with like the basic income movement. How do you see that potentially fitting in or changing things, or do you see it coming in? And if so, like, will we ever get to the Star Trek economy?
I don't have a good answer.
It's a baby step.
I've got an opinion.
Go ahead.
No, at one level, I've done my research on basic income, and the jury's still out. Like, we don't know whether that'll
Very much
out.
so.
It's an experiment, and as a nerd, I'm actually okay with experimenting. And we've thrown our money away on stupider things, right? And so I'm okay seeing the experiment. However, some of these programs, as they kind of run amok, actually it becomes an entitlement that becomes a difficult thing to take back. It's really difficult to try the experimental mode. Hey, let's give you a basic income to live off of and then take it back, right? Because you've now taken away politically, that's unfeasible. So now we get back into the civic things, and politically, we're not going to find politicians that are willing to give you a thing and then take it back. Actually, somebody will give it to you happily, somebody else who's going to take it back is going to get the sword in their mouth, whatever. Like, that's their problem to solve. And I think we just have, I go back to we have to think about these problems a lot smarter. There's a lot of capital in this room. Like, how expensive this meeting is right now, just if we were all to take our salaries. There's a lot of brain power just sitting listening to two chuckle fucks talk about the things. Hopefully it's inspiring people to kind of create and solve problems. Chuckle fucks. No, but I get nervous when I'm in a room with more than 10 people.
The mic is actually pointed at yourself.
Oh, sorry.
You sound great.
I get nervous when I'm in meetings with more than 10 people because I'm like, whoa, there's a lot of spend happening right here. Like, so when I get a room full of people,
I have a question. I know that not to bring in politics, but the biggest factor in this political front is all the jobs and job creation. So we're just talking about the auto market, like 7 million jobs, $500 billion market. I know this is not that far away, or is it far away? Like, where do you see this? Don't you think that a lot of like Detroit, people that are being directly affected by all of this?
yes.
Like, is the lobbyists going to fight you? Like the hurdles.
I can answer
I feel like it's just.
Yep.
But then again, I don't know how far I have to go. Or
Just point it straight at yourself.
So the question was, there's a lot of money at stake, are the people in Detroit trying to fight this? As I said, I am from Detroit, and the answer is no, actually. If you look at what Mary Barra of GM has invested in Lyft, $500 million. Mark Fields, the CEO of Ford, just announced a couple of weeks ago that they're in 5 years they'll be building cars without steering wheels, not designed for drivers. They are shockingly trying to embrace this quicker. You know, while some other Frankies look at like companies are playing in and out of it. Google's not going to make a breakthrough based on this. So the answer to me is that this will happen. It should happen. It'll save lives if it happens. And we have to deal with other bigger societal issues like, and I think the biggest one is jobs. I really believe that. And we'll deal with that as a society. And you know, guaranteed income is definitely one answer. I think it's exciting. I was actually a believer. I don't understand. I think it was Sweden that just the voters overwhelmingly vetoed it. It was shocking to me. Was it Sweden? Switzerland. One of those S countries is kind of socially.
Sweden did 30
It was Sweden. So I was rolling and thinking I was rolling. Yes.
I just wanted to offer the little historical perspective here in San Francisco. BART does not need a driver. It never did. It didn't in the 70s. And there was an actual vote to whether or not we were going to pay extra taxes for the guy to sit in the front and fall asleep. And all that guy does is he has a button, a panic button, and he can stop, and that's pretty much
It's still there.
Yep. That kind of
Okay.
stuff.
There's also we have a question over here.
So there's a question about jobs and technology in relationship to jobs. So I guess it's a two-part question. How do you see a new technology as a driver for job growth? And since jobs seem to be essential for giving us this money that pays for our essential, food, clothing, shelter, do you see some alternative to the concept of a job to obtain the good to keep everybody alive and happy? It's kind of a two-part question.
So, honestly, I've been thinking about this a lot, actually. And I've been thinking about it in terms of, as technologists, what we do is try to eliminate ourselves from more jobs. Like, we're built to design ourselves out. Like, we build factories that eliminate the need for people to have robots so that it's more efficient. Ultimately, we'll get to this point where we're going to create, we look at other technologies other than self-driving cars. We look at artificial intelligence, machine learning. We're looking at, I had a conversation. I don't have conversations with people often that really kind of, I would say blow my mind, but I actually had my mind blown by a guy I respect who's a patent troll, right? He's a piece of shit. And, but I'm like, you've seen all sorts of really crazy things. Like, what would cause you to leave the patent troll business? And this guy told me about some shit that they're working on, which is a thing that exists today. It's around artificial intelligence. I can actually talk about it. But I was just like, yeah. Like, it was beyond, I was like, we can do that as a thing now, as people. And there are people really pushing the boundaries. It's not, space exploration is cool. All sorts of other things which are going to be drivers. There's other technologies which allow the human race to do some really cool stuff. And then there are people which are thinking way the fuck out. And they eliminate us as people. These are technologies we're building. And you start to dive into things around allowing machines to have emotional intelligence. Once you start, we can't even process that as people, but codifying emotional intelligence in robots, when guys like Elon Musk get in front of a bunch of people, or Stephen Hawking, or any of these other people, Al Gore, and they start to freak the fuck out around what the future is, this is what they're freaking out about, right? This is like they're playing the chess game, 2 decades out, and it's like, holy fuck, like that's...
Dude.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to represent the other side of the coin.
The Mark Canner response.
Some of us make tools to create jobs, to empower users. There's no such thing as synthetic emotions. All that stuff will be driven by a human inside that little booth over there. Wizard of Oz, goes inside the machine. These create jobs.
Yep.
Some of us are about creating jobs to help humans, not to take away.
I think that is it.
That's what I would You may not go to CVS, but we're not in Shenzhen in the little boxes. It's called software. You might have heard about software.
I think you are right. The history of technology has been creating jobs. There's no question about that. And but it's still the fact on the other side, though, is like, so this Donald Trump phenomenon, which is in part driven by, anti-xenophobia, but it's also driven by the fact that there's a lot of, outside the cities, in rural America, there's a lot of men who don't have jobs. And he blames trade, but the truth is, a lot of it is innovation in technology, which is, and all the research shows us, technology is lost jobs. They've changed, they've created a lot of jobs in San Francisco, but lost a lot of jobs in Iowa. And that's just a fact. And we have to deal with it, we have to confront it, we have to be empathetic to the people whose jobs are lost. And that's just the reality. And driverless cars, probably more than anything else, I got one frustrated with. Driverless cars more than anything else would epitomize that. But yet in this room, talking to people who are creating jobs all the time, and technology has done that. But you're right, you have to deal with all these people that are affected by the job loss. They're real human beings. They have pride. They were raised and trained a certain way. And they don't feel a sense of worth, they feel the value of the family, and they're angry at that. And that's what this election seems to be about.
Can I say something about that? Because I moved to Cleveland. All right, I left Silicon Valley. I moved my family to Cleveland to figure that out, to help create jobs. There's a lot of jobs that have nothing to do with Andy Grignon level hackers or Jennifer Polka's Code for America. As you go down the pyramid, it gets bigger and bigger by orders of magnitude. So, and the call centers are the digital salt mines. Those are the horrible jobs. But there's plenty in the middle. You go ask an organization, how come you don't update your events on your website? You know what they told me? Because the people who created the website wanted to charge me $5,000 to update the website. This is how they're doing websites in Cleveland. So I started making websites for free for people, to show them how they can create their own damn websites. Right? So the idea is that there's plenty of opportunity there in these new jobs. It's not about programming, right? It's like all the other people. There's this huge amounts of jobs that will be created. Go to Kansas City, Tampa, Lafayette, Louisiana. It's happening everywhere. Chattanooga, Tennessee. It's happening everywhere.
But the other part of that, though, is having a certain level of just like reading, writing, arithmetic, we have to introduce technology into our kids' curriculum. And this starts to become, again, another civic exercise, right? Because right now they can all snap like a fucking badass, but they can't code in Swift or they can't create websites. If that should be, I think, just basic kind of knowledge. The fact that somebody says, hey, can you make me a website? Yeah, I actually can. It's super not hard. You know, we can do it with a word.
Just using
But we have to have that.
Become social media people, put on events. There's plenty of money.
Sure. Well, money is, well, that's a tricky one. Money is a problem at the civic level.
We have some other questions.
It's a little bit different direction. What do you think about privacy and how we can actually be able to keep our own self as technology evolves? We kind of see that's kind of going away, and how do you see that down the road?
I think that's one of the tougher questions we're going to be dealing with for years, because a lot of this advances in innovation relies upon us giving up some of what we know. Actually, I testified before Congress, and the members of Congress, both Republican and Democrat, started out, this is over a year ago, it's 13 months ago, and they said, we think you own all your own information no matter what. I said, really? They said, well, what if you're in a car? And do you think that that information, your windshield wipers are working, or the temperature outside should be owned by you? If it could be provided value to those around you, the National Weather Service? No. I said, how about if you've gotten over a pothole? How about if you've hit the car in front of you and there's accidents, or you're in fog? How about if there's an icy, this doesn't really matter for San Francisco. In my world, Detroit and Washington, we get a lot of snow and ice. You hit ice, you don't see things, there's people getting killed all the time because they don't know what's going on. Or take what's happened in San Francisco a couple years ago. There was an earthquake. How far did it go? Well, everyone that was wearing a jawbone immediately knew how far the earthquake had gone. That's private information, right? But society has a great value. We take it back to the car, and let's say there's a major car accident. First responders come. Wouldn't it be valuable for them to know who in the car is alive, what their vitals are, so they can triage?
Who's worth treating?
Pardon me?
No, I just said something horrible. Who's worth treating? Hey, you guys want something controversial? That's that is exactly the exercise that artificial intelligence cars have to make the decision on.
The dream of Obamacare in part was to gather information about what works and what doesn't through electronic medical records. By all accounts, including the Obama administration, the American Medical Association, it's not working through that. But what it will be working through is actually gathering of data from hospital machines, which is on intranet, which is now being aggregated in various ways, so you can figure out how people are being treated worldwide in hospitals and what is working and what is not. Is that private information? Absolutely, it's your medical record, but if you could strip out anonymous. We took all the people that make all these devices that you're wearing around your wrist and smartphones, and we got them in a room, and we said, look, this privacy thing is going to kill us. Government's going to say you can't unless we figure out what our standards are. And we came up with a set of guidelines. Government's very happy, companies are very happy, and the privacy advocates are very happy. I think it's sometimes the people who are most knowledgeable and effective about the possibilities got to get together and agree on transparency, simplicity, uniform rules, things like that, while respecting privacy. But privacy, as an end, is not the only thing that matters. There's a greater social good sometimes we have to recognize.
But you know what's interesting around privacy? You know, I was at a dinner earlier last week with, he is the global head of innovation for Bayer, the assholes that just bought Monsanto. And I mean, you guys have seen it. I mean, lots of billions of dollars. And anyway, his job is innovation at Bayer. And he's like, hey, I got a question. Like, what do you think of blockchain as a technology? I'm like, oh, and actually blockchain, if I look forward, I think that's an interesting enabler technology. He's like, well, what do you think? Here's the problem we've got to solve. Our number one thing that we have to sell is Claritin D, right? A bunch of you guys take it, I'm sure. Claritin D, the number one ingredient, is this thing that allows people to make meth, and so they have to control it, so it's behind the register now at the pharmacy. He's like, well, what if we were to create, using blockchain, a technology which allows like a TSA pre-check line for people who are cleared to buy Claritin D? Like, this is just an over-the-counter medication. And when you just ask that simple question, again, the nerd in you was like, oh, this is an easy thing to solve. We just do this, this, and this. What that opens up is all sorts of the privacy problems, right? How we get HIPAA things. So now we have to have an abstraction between the people who make Claritin D, Bayer.
That's not true. They still ask you for your driver's license.
They still do, but what they're actually trying to do, but they want to have this, they want to have like the anonymization. That's a hard word. But they want to have the ability for people to buy that without self-identifying. More you have like this card which is like, I'm allowed to buy Claritin D, which is silly. I mean, it's silly, but this is
get them to do that with their GMO seeds that fall over to the farmer next door, and then they charge the farmer for their GMO seeds. Same company.
Oh, sure.
Same company, right?
Yes. Are you looking for an argument? Because I'm not going to give it to you. Yes, it's all the problem. But what they're trying to do is, how do you as a big stupid company reduce the ability for otherwise regular people to buy a thing, right? I want to buy some Claritin D, and I don't want to show my license to buy it, which is dumb. And like, that's a hard problem to solve. But, you know, again, as nerds, we can solve this. It's a easily solvable blockchain problem, like, as a technology. But it's not a solvable problem from a civic perspective. But, I'm sorry, you have it.
Thank you for sharing this. I wonder if you have thoughts on how we can solve problems like world peace, if these unused attacks into Europe all over the world. So, like, kind of back to the fundamental questions of safety for all human beings, and also San Francisco has housing, education in California. So, how can we, as people working in technology, kind of taking steps by step to solve this kind of problem? Maybe how to break that into smaller problems that we can actually solve.
So I'm going to suggest that, very selfishly, this is actually going to be solved with a generational change. I'm Gen X, so I was born in '73. Like, my generation, great, we had a pretty shitty thing, but we are very selfish. We're very much in it for the money. There's cause and effect. We're skeptical. There's all sorts of problems with our generation. One of the things I've learned, though, about millennials and Gen Zs they are very much interested in solving problems for the greater good. I actually gave up, I remember a long time ago, I gave a bonus. I gave this kid, we were doing WebOS, and I gave this kid, he was 25, whatever he was, and I gave him like a $75,000 cash bonus for his contribution to WebOS. And I was like, he's one of my stars. And he just kind of sat there, and he's like, thanks. Like, he gave $0 around getting landed 75. To me, like, again, from a generational divide, like, fuck, why aren't you dancing on the goddamn ceiling right now? Because you just got a bunch of money. But money wasn't a motivator for him. What was really important to him, as I learned over time, was his ability to make change for the greater good. He wanted to be on stage talking about some new stuff that he'd invented. He didn't care about money. Like, that's not the motivator. And I think when we look, to answer your question, when we start to look at how do we start to solve world peace, and like what is actually happening is this next generation, these millennials and Gen Zs, are stepping up. These are the people who are lining the halls at the digital service when I was just at their thing. It's all millennials and Gen Zs, right? They're actually a very selfless generation. And so they're actually trying to solve problems not to enrich their own kind of pockets, but to solve world peace, bigger problems. Yeah. I don't know. It's an interesting thing that I've seen. It's a trend that I've seen. I don't have it cracked. It's a nut that I've not cracked at all, but that's just something I've seen. I don't know about you. Oh, sorry, you're back. I can talk about what else you want to talk about?
Yeah, so I want to hear your take on social interaction. It's like for millions of years now we've been hanging out in the same field, in real life, and we're laying the foundations now with the technologies that we have. I mean, 40 years ago we were playing Pong, right? And now it's just a technology disrupt. And I tried on this HP VR headset with HTC collaboration. And I was on Tatooine, and I had a lightsaber, and it was like, it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen, It's just like, again, 4 years ago we were playing Pong. Yeah. So, what do you think is going to happen? Are we even going to go out? Do we even want to go outside anymore in a few years?
Yes, we will. Here's why. So why are you here tonight? Why are you here tonight? Because the reality is, despite the fact that all of us are bound by the focus on technology and innovation, it requires the five sense experience of looking someone in the eye, seeing them, feeling, sensing, touching, totally grokking them to see whether you want to have a relationship with them. That's why, even though I'm in the world of technology, we produce the largest event that people have to show up at. And it's because of the five sense experience, you can figure out what a company's like, whether you want to do business. There's also a huge value that I don't understand how you get it electronically of serendipity.
Yes.
You'll meet and see and understand people and things and ideas and concepts. And I give a lot of career advice to people. As you get older, this is what happens, Andy, you've been successful, so everyone thinks you know something, right? So my advice to people is not like, work really hard at your job and spend 50 hours a day doing it. My advice even to my own employees is, look, I love what you do, but you have to have balance in your life. And another thing you have to do is you have to actually go outside of your comfort zone and what you're great at and learn other things. And that makes you more innovative, because innovation is actually putting disparate concepts together in a way that no one else has before that has value. So it's part of a balanced life. Volunteer with your condo board, or do something, or get into charity. And that's what, to me, innovation is. That's why, when people, it's common in the United States, we don't want our legislators traveling and spending taxpayer money. I'm like, get the heck out of the United States and see the world and understand we'll have a different perspective. I want you to learn. I want you to get a bigger perspective. We're doing something now, we're doing some research. I guess I'm not supposed to discuss it because we haven't released it yet, but we're looking at why people are against trade with the rest of the world when we have 95% of the world outside our borders. We need trade. It's the best thing. It allows us to buy smartphones for a few $100s rather than several $1,000, and there's thousands of reasons. And one of the questions we're asking is, who do you support for president, and do you have a passport, and have you been outside the United States? I suspect there's a certain presidential candidate, most of the people support him have not stepped foot within 30 miles outside their own state, much less the United States. That's just my suspicion. Does anyone understand what I just said?
Yes. Preaching to the choir.
Preaching to the choir.
Andy.
Yeah, sure.
Gary for president.
Gary for president.
Can we just rewind just for a few seconds? Can we talk about state control? What if there's a snow emergency? Well, in a driverless car scenario, will the state be able to turn off your car and say, no, you can't travel today?
That's a question for Andy.
Yeah, you know what? There's lots of scary shit they can do, and most of you don't know about it. And we build these back doors in with the cooperation, and it has to be done. Like, yeah. So could you do something like that? Sure.
It could be done.
You can, and that's why you've got people like the guy who runs the FBI saying, "Oh, I put electrical tape over my camera on my laptop and things like that." It's not because he's a crazy person. It's because, we can actually, it used to be that, the green light was an actual physical condition of the camera being on. It's not. No, it's fine. We can turn the light on and off whenever the fuck we want. We can have a camera on. It's cool. Like, it's not cool, actually. That's what happens. But you have the ability, like when you guys traveled to China, at least when I was at HP and at Apple, one of the things we did was we had burner laptops, right? You never go to China, at least as part of a big company, without having a burner. And what's a burner? Well, that fucker is going to get thrown into the trash pit as soon as I get back. Because I don't know, when I go through security, when they take it, because they do, you do another room, maybe there's a key locker, maybe there isn't, whatever the fuck, and it's not worth it. So you get burned. And so we can do all sorts of awful, horrible things. Will we do it to turn off your car, to prevent you from traveling? I mean, if you were to say, like, all right, now, kind of postulating, the Amber Alert, right? If once we know if the Amber Alert is out there, right? We know license plate XYZ, whatever. If we could just turn off that person's car, why the hell wouldn't we do that? Now, are you okay with that or not? Because it introduces a whole other set of things, which are, oh shit, I don't have to turn off my car, right? Or maybe you're wrongly accused. I don't know. There's all sorts of deep implications. But if you were to just, as an engineer, build these things in, be like, yeah, let's leave that door open.
But it seems that that's where we're going with all of this.
Sure.
Right? So that's in our future. And back to the liability thing, what if your Tesla kills somebody? Are you responsible? Or is Tesla responsible? Or is the engineer on the case?
Whatever happened with that? The guy, the accident that just killed someone, right?
Well, Tesla had an accident where someone died. And I happened to be in Israel a month or two before it was announced, at least. And I was meeting with a Mobileye. Mobileye has the brains at that point for the Tesla. And they were pretty clear that Tesla was being a little aggressive. The technology was not quite ready. I don't know how to play out in courts, but the fact is, the court will decide on the basis of whatever the law is. If you're a lot of all right, I'll confess. I went to law school. I was a lawyer. So being Jewish, once you're there for life. So I will say that there's a principle in law that you must have intent. And that's why insane people or people who are found mentally incompetent cannot be held liable. So that goes to the question there with what the liability is. The bigger question about whether the government can shut off and on things is, it goes to me. This is something I've been spending a career on. Is when should technology be illegal or legal? When should it? And obviously the microphone knows that I'm talking about it. So there's certain technologies which are illegal to possess. Nuclear weaponry, for example, is a good example. The potential harm is so great that our government, society has determined.
DVD crackers.
DVD crackers is an example. The intellectual property lobbyists are so intensely powerful, they have convinced the government that that's bad. Radar detectors in some states.
LiDAR.
The product that turns red lights green that is good for ambulance drivers and fire trucks. In some states, it's illegal to have that and use it. There's scanners which listen to conversations which are illegal. So the question is, what becomes illegal? Now, putting aside the issue of guns, which is very divisive, and I'm not even going to go there. So what, in our world of technology, should be legal? And that's I always, we were pretty visible on the Apple issue, frankly, involving encryption, because we took the position, not shockingly, because Apple's a member of ours, but as we kept thinking it through, even though as Americans, we felt, wow, we want to get those bad guys. As people in the technology world felt, well, wait, if our government's going to get this technology, the bad guys are likely to get it as well. We said Apple should not be forced to create a new program. It's very different than forcing someone to open up what they already have and have them create something. But then the next step, I mean, for me was, fortunately or unfortunately, I was invited to speak to 300 Justice Department attorneys who focus on this stuff. That was a hostile audience. You guys are great, by the way. So they asked me the Michael Dukakis question, if your kid was kidnapped, would you want, and then you found a bad guy's phone, would you want it to be able to be unlocked? And my answer was, of course I want it to be unlocked. I beg you to do it. But still, there is a principle there, and the principle is, how far you should go in opening up to everything. But there is also, we are dealing with foreign countries, for example, they can turn off Twitter, they can turn off the internet, and they have. There was an example here, I think in San Francisco, was it where they turned off the train station for most of it? Or is that it?
I didn't hear
in terms of the ability to receive signals from the train station for some emergency reason. Yes, it was you. At some point, the government is you, and you have to trust your government. And as technology increases, these are the debates which will be, under what circumstances does the government have the right? What checks and balances are in the system to give the government the right? What type of pre-review is necessary? And these are the issues which are being brought out for a lot of things, whether it's drone attacks or it's the government intruding. And it goes back to the Fourth Amendment. Unreasonable search and seizure means you go to a court and you have some third party looking at it objectively. So we'll work these things out. I'm pretty confident.
Now, what's interesting about the Apple thing, I mean, this Apple thing resolved itself, but, that was really, as a nerd, obviously that kind of hit, to my core, and I hung out with a bunch of my other nerd friends at a nerd fest, we throw parties on Thursdays, it's lame. Anyways, I'm meeting with a bunch of security people, and we started getting really deep into this. These are people who actually know. And what we were talking about at the time was, the ability for Apple to create a thing, which, today, like, there's not going to be somebody who's going to be guessing your passcode on the little screen, right? What's going to happen is they're going to lift the chips off the solder, they're going to lay it into another thing, a harness, and they're going to crack it brute force. This has nothing to do with the UI, any other things. This is all about algorithms and math. And this is where an uneducated populace starts to kind of get fleeced over. Like, they're like, oh, fuck it. You want to solve the kidnappers or the terrorists or the other things. But if you cut right to it, what they were asking for was the ability for Apple to solve or give a piece of data which would allow somebody to go from an effectively a limitless decryption problem down to one that is solved within mere days with today's technology. Like, this isn't something crazy. This would be a brute force attack on a set of chips, on a board, on a thing, with some software which would have solved that. So Apple fought very strongly against it, but they can't fight the technical battle in the public court because nobody's going to fucking get that, right? Like, math is, this is really difficult. Math is fucking hard. And they can't have, they have to fight it with these really dumb brute force, things. And, when we look at it, it distills down to something fairly stupid and dumb. But when you actually cut to the chase as educated people, we understand, fuck, that's a big deal that you're going to give away. And so I'm really glad that they fought hard against that, because that was the right thing to do. But these nuances aren't necessarily nuances. And as they play out in kind of the newspapers and CNN and all the other whatevers, these aren't, they're actually much bigger fights being fought. That, again, as if you were just to, look at this one example, I'm sure there's lots of those in other industries. I just happen to know technology, but I'm sure this is happening in lots of other areas too. Whatever. You got something to say?
Are you familiar with Sesame, a program in China that effectively vacuums social network activity and applies a citizenship score to individuals?
So the question was, do you know that there's this thing called Sesame? Yeah, there is a compliance program that happens in China, and it does mass data collection, sentiment analysis, and it looks for people who are kind of stirring the pot. Luckily, we don't live there, but luckily, I mean, but they have that ability, and you know what? You'd be a fool to think that we don't have that ability either, right? I mean, all your tweets are public, all of your, and by the way, there's lots of data centers around the country where there's rooms that no employees of the company can go into, but people with big, scary badges can. Like, that exists.
So we may already have a citizenship score, we just don't know.
Oh.
Probably.
So, you know what?
That's your butt score.
I spent some time.
Yes.
I spent some time.
That's what it is.
My old manager and a good friend of mine is now co-CEO of this company called Bridgewater. And Bridgewater is the world's largest hedge fund. His name's John Rubenstein. He and I are really close friends. We talked about stuff. So I talked to his company and what they've been doing and what they've been up to. His top software guy used to be the CTO of the NSA. And so this is the guy that instituted PRISM and all sorts of other interesting, and to talk with the guy is fascinating, right? Not because it's like Big Brother, it's just because he's been at the helm for 18 plus years during some of the most difficult times our government has been through from a technologist perspective. And you get to see, like, why do we have problems? Or, I'm sorry, why do we have programs like PRISM, which are things which are watching, it's big data analysis, kind of like what China did. Like, it happens, right? But there's other things, right, at play. Snowden happened under his tenure, right? So Snowden, I mean, we can paint him up however we want, right? The movie out now, is he a villain or is he a hero? Like, it's, and there's lots of interesting perspectives, on that. But it's actually, when you actually talk to the guy, he's like, we spent 95% of our resources looking for the bad guy from outside, and maybe 5% of our resources kind of looking, introspecting, on our own thing. And then Snowden happened. He goes, and the whole thing didn't switch, it didn't turn, but lots of money went into looking for the bad from within.
So,
all right,
traitor or patriot? Neither or both. I'll give you an hour.
That's a really tough one. I've thought of it. Obviously, this isn't the first time. Like, oh shit, never thought of that before. No, I've spent some time, and I kind of go back and forth. I look back. The fact that we have the transparency in our government that we have today is because of him, right? He opened up lots of doors, from a citizen's perspective. I'm like, well, that's pretty great. On the other hand, he also caused a lot of really shitty damage to lots of other people, and so I, personally, I don't like to waffle, but I'm waffling on it because I think what he did was heroic, from an information and transparency with our government perspective. I think what he did by jeopardizing the lives of classifying or opening information he did was criminal. And so I don't know what to think.
Do we actually know them? We actually know that other parts. I don't think we do.
I don't know. It's a fascinating thing.
I would follow up. What about the recent developments in Putin's Russia and his newsstand towards reestablishing the KGB as the MGB?
Yeah.
We were having it there here. Now he's really doing it.
There's a profound lack of tinfoil up on the stage.
Fair enough.
I'll hold that for another time.
Fair enough.
I have two questions related to cloud. With the advent of cloud in the world, how do you see IT departments faring? And the follow-up question is, as you centralize data in a few companies and actually afford the infrastructure to deploy that, how does the government plan to even the playing field across the big holder of all the data?
Go ahead, which means go answer the fucking question.
Scopely.
Scopely, yeah. So I think IT departments are actually in a pretty sweet spot right now. I think what we're seeing is what we need, honestly, is more educated IT departments. I've seen a lot of, the old kind of saying used to be, nobody ever got fired for, buying Microsoft. Yay.
The old saying was IBM.
It was. IBM was oh, shit. That's the old saying.
That's the old saying. Yeah, right.
That came out of your punch card machine. Gotcha. No, but it was. But I've seen now a switch towards like the questions are becoming more nuanced. Nobody ever got fired for doing Amazon cloud services versus XYZs, or are you going to do what's that?
Baidu.
Baidu. I mean, yeah, come on, man. Like, what we're actually seeing is a need for a much more educated and nuanced and savvy IT workforce. So I think we're probably going to see as an increase in spend on IT just in general, right? Granted, they're not managing individual servers or app deployments or things like that, but they're actually having to be knowledge workers instead of kind of brute force workers, right? Like, I guess this.
But the data is all centralized in these data warehouses. Would you think those tech companies have an advantage on machine learning, artificial intelligence?
You know what? That's interesting. No, I don't think they have an advantage. They're different skill sets, totally different skill sets. I think the people who can really understand machine learning are the people who are stacking big on data scientists, and I mean that's kind of I wouldn't say a new thing, but we're starting to see people who can mine significant. It is, and it crosses over in IT a little bit, but it's also what would you say, like the new SQL administrator kind of thing? Remember those people from way back when? Well, they actually got CS degrees. They figured out how to actually apply algorithm and algorithmics to big data sets, and now they command a lot of respect right now. I'm just seeing that just in general. And in fact, one of the things I see with Siberia, we work with lots of big companies, just huge companies, and the one thing we get to see time and time again is what they're all worried about. And they're all worried about machine learning, artificial intelligence, it's big data sets. I mean, these are companies that accumulate, in some case, one case, petabytes of data, but they have to make sense of it, right? LinkedIn famously does this, right? LinkedIn watches your mouse. There's a JavaScript script that watches your mouse on the screen to see where you hover over, like what checkboxes you're hovering over. Like it's that level of detail, right? That's a huge amount of data.
And is it obvious that LinkedIn completely ruins the user experience? It's not the worst website ever.
So,
has nobody ever told them? It's horrible.
yeah.
Not surprising.
Okay, I've been dying to ask this question. So we've been talking a lot about technology, and I'd like to change the subject to energy, right? Because without energy, we don't have technology.
Yep.
So where do you see the future of energy? Renewables, whatever, do we do our own generation?
Good. All right, well, I mean, I got lots to say about it. Because, so I gave, I told you earlier, so just so everyone else knows, you work at PG&E, and so you're kind of you got a biased question, that's really cool. I gave a talk in Santiago, Chile, where I also talked to their number one power generator, their PG&E, right?
Yeah.
And you guys are all worried about the exact same thing. And we had chats with people in France, in Paris, also. And so what's interesting is everyone's thinking about the same municipality level of ways to embrace technology and where we're going to bring power. So a lot of people are thinking about things, how do we make it easier to pay your electric bill?
Yeah, me neither.
No, what they're actually trying to do is look at ways to embrace, things like the Powerwall, or how do you? I mean, this is why Elon is actually really well positioned. I mean, he's smart. There's an understatement. He's smart to position his company as a power provider, right? I mean, look at everybody wants these fucking batteries. He just signed this thing for California, the state of California. He's got this gigantic. How many hundreds of megawatts of battery power availability from his batteries? I think that's going to be a smart thing. And that's where the more meaningful, I think, contributions come into play.
And how do you see technology and energy working together, right?
It's
both
the same thing.
dependent, right?
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
There's no technology and energy. It's the same thing.
100%, yeah, of course.
You know, at some point, our society is going to figure out that actually electric cars work off of energy. It often comes from coal. And there's this great myth in America that somehow electric cars are better than fossil fuel cars, but they're using the same source for the most part.
Yeah.
So that's one point. The other point is that the issue of fracking has changed the energy department in the last 10 years, so that we are becoming self-sufficient in energy. But there's still some questions out there about what the impact is on the more earthquakes, and I think it's a question. There's no answer yet. And then either way, if people say it's resolved one way or the other, I think they're wrong. I think there's the third issue is what happened in Japan, in my personal opinion, with the nuclear power plant, how France and others respond to that is unfortunate. Because, the truth is, at least on the East Coast, in Virginia, West Virginia, where I have a home, there is coal mining is very important to a lot of people. But everyone who goes into the coal mines ends up with black lung disease. It's like 100% certainty that you will die from black lung disease unless you die from something else first. So we have a problem with coal in this country, putting aside the pollution aspects of it.
Yeah.
So in my world, which would be more perfect, we figure out, and I think Bill Gates has tried to do some work on this, is to try to come up with a way of dealing with nuclear that is more effective. You try to deal with solar as limited as it is. You try to deal with wind and thermal. And you try to keep come up with a fusion method. You keep working with it. And you don't say one thing is going to solve all our problems. It's kind of like, I don't want to offend anyone, like HIV. Everyone was looking for the cure. The cure ended up, not the cure, the way of dealing with it ended up being a cocktail of many, many different things. And like a lot of things in life, there's no silver bullet. It's a combination of a lot of smart things put together.
Very good. My whole point is without energy, there's no technology.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's all I want to say. Yeah, without the nothing.
Bottom line.
You need energy. Although, actually, the truth though, in developing countries, there are a lot of solar products sold in the technology, little things that communicate. There are things you can just crank up. I mean, you don't necessarily need an electric company. So.
No, we don't need the grid, right? But you do need some kind of generation mechanism, right?
We love electricity. That's probably that should have been the short answer, which is something that's better.
So we touched on artificial intelligence and data mining and so on and so forth. The holy grail of AI used to be defeating the game of Go. Now that we've defeated it, or Google has defeated it, where do you see that going from here? Like what? I mean, we won.
Well, we're not done.
Essentially, we won. Now, how does it get commoditized? How does it get in my pocket?
How does it get there? We're just beginning. I mean, obviously, predictive intelligence is so important in terms of we're crawling in this, but we haven't even begun to walk in terms of technology and deep learning. We're not there yet. For example, one of our fundamental problems we still have, let's acknowledge it, and now in this country, in the world, is education. The fact is that everybody learns differently. Right? Some people are visual, some people are auditory, some people are physical, some people behaviorally, Kindle-like device. But then you learn, but we haven't even begun to tap it. When we've done with the singular university or whatever it's called, that's just starting out. I mean, we're just beginning in terms of how you educate people, how you deal with agriculture, how you deal with clean water. We have such a distance to go, but we have the tools, the basic tools. So I don't think we were anywhere near any holy. I think the Go thing is cute but irrelevant. It's like defeating chestnuts. They're intellectual exercises with proof things to a small group of people. But what you want to do is make massive change with massive groups of people. The way you make massive changes is you fundamentally change their lives and take away the things that we, frankly, as well-to-do Americans take for granted. And you get to the point where, the Obamacare, the issues like that, saying that everyone has a right to health. Well, the way you get them the right to health is you use technology, use data, use the tools that are out there, and you have smart people developing. And that's what I think the goal is here. That's why I get up every day and do my job, because I'm excited that innovation will make a difference. It's not a matter of playing a better game of chess, which I was in my high school chess club, I will confess. But you know what? The computer will always be.
It was a better game of chess.
What's interesting about that, though, is to see, some of the other more interesting things I've seen, and they kind of, again, as you can imagine, I like the weird and kind of scary stuff. And some of the more interesting things that I've seen have been around manipulation of systems, right? So artificial intelligence is kind of cool, right? We can talk to a computer, we can say, make me a coffee, whatever the fuck you think you can do, and it'll do whatever. And when we get to the state, though, of being able to model, kind of multi-level systems of organisms, those organisms can be people, they can be biology, they can be atoms, they can be all sorts of other things, like maybe this is a protein that you apply a certain stimulus to it, and when this system all works together, then we ultimately produce the cure for cancer. It's modeling, but it's modeling stimulus in and stimulus out. And so then you start to look at that, and how does that portray into populations of people, right? All right, apply to this particular demographic, this particular stimulus. The ultimate goal is to win the election or pass Prop 32F, whatever the fuck that is. And what you got to do is you got to apply this stimulus to this group, this stimulus to that group, and then the predictable outcome, which is they're going to model theirs. And so that's why groups like the CIA has a investment arm, investment vehicle, and they fund things like this, right? And I'm not even
the CEO the last week.
Right? And they're doing some interesting things, but it's not necessarily, I'm not saying this is all for population control, but this is all for things when you say we've won a game of Go, great. What they're trying to win is the game of life. And whether life is, chemicals, proteins responding appropriately given stimuluses, populations of people doing things, that's where we're past playing Go. Go is the poster child of, oh yeah, great, guess what we can do. No. We're well on to other. And that to me is the bigger learning, is to start to see, the bigger end game out of all of these things. Again, I'm not trying to be like on the Tiflon. We're not trying to control minds, we're not trying to do this. Those have applications for sure. Really though, we're starting to try to look into biomedicine, right? How do we actually manipulate biological systems intelligently to generate things we couldn't have thought about before, right? Position it that way, it sounds pretty great. Once you position it in this is how we pass, or elect whoever as whatever, that's kind of bad, right? But that's AI.
A little bit different direction, but since the computers are out there, UI did not really change that much. We have the keyboard and the touch board, mouse, pointing. Do you see in our lifetime that this will actually change and there will be some sort of brain interface that we can actually have different input?
Yeah, if you look at Gartner's, are you familiar with their hype cycle that they create every year? They have a really great graph that shows technologies, kind of on a very early stage, things that investors, people are paying attention to. They're kind of the early stage of this curve. It kind of goes up, it peaks. That's kind of where we are with technologies, specifically around blockchain, and it's the expectations that really, it's like this, this height of expectations. And then there's what they call the trough of disillusionment, which is you start to kind of crash down, and you start to realize the limitations of the technology. And then there's the path to enlightenment, which is the productization. So, virtual reality is further along on this graph. It's actually on that path to creation. Augmented reality is starting to kind of dip into the trough of disillusionment. But kind of what's riding up, starting to get near the top of the hype cycle is BCI, brain-computer interfacing, and that is, again, still has a lot more hype ahead of it, and I totally agree with it. They've got some really fascinating ways for us to do and we're still discovering ways to interface our brain and computers and things like that. What's going to happen though is it's going to reach a fever pitch, in the next 0 to 2 years, and then it's going to crash down when we realize, well, we can't really do all that stuff for another 10. But then there's going to be a product. So, but that is certainly on the hype cycle of really interesting thing I'm watching.
Well, with the disabled paralyzed community, I think you're starting to see advances there that are real and making a difference in people's lives. And that's what a lot of this is about to me. You're talking about human suffering, cancer, things like that, and that's a technology where there's a real definite gain. There's no other way of doing it. But this other stuff, I think the intermediate step that's really hot right now, Amazon is proving his voice.
Yeah.
Commands rather than a GUI where you actually physically have to use your hands.
right? And that's what Apple was getting a lot of shit for with their AirBuds. Remember, like they introduced those little stupid things.
They're nasty.
And everyone's just shitting on them because it's good sport. But you know, a few people have pointed it out. This is the first time we've actually attached an intelligent, you know, speech apparatus to our ears, which is available to us all the time. Granted, you have to go through Siri. I'm not saying it's a hit. I think it's actually a miss for product, but I think from a product or a technology perspective, this is the first time we're going to get people used to having. We're going to get used to having a voice assistant. So the Amazon, like maybe the Echo, I fucking love my Alexa. I love the Alexa, man. Alexa is great. And you can do all sorts of stuff. Like I had Alexa playing music, and I was just like talking to somebody. It's like, Alexa, shut the fuck up. And it stopped. Whether it's like reading emotion or whatever the fuck, but you can actually, you know, it's one of those things where it's like, oh shit. Like it was a surprise because I didn't expect it to actually work. But I was like, man, like we're gonna have that level of interaction with our stuff. So you got a question in the back.
What do you think about consciousness and how close do you think we are to replicating consciousness?
That's singular.
That's the singular. Fuck you, dude.
So I'm sure you've all read The Singularity, right? Well, it's been in my bathroom for 6 years, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Which really describes. No, but that's what we're talking about.
What do you think? All right, this is we get to actually talk. So Elon Musk got on stage and said he thinks that there's a 50% chance that we're all working and living in a simulation.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know, I grew up with science fiction, and that's what I was so encouraged by. And a lot of the science fiction has come true. A lot of it is not, and never will.
Yeah.
And yeah, this is like when you do really high. So this is just true. Yeah. I've got something in my life.
This is philosophy 101 of whatever, we're all just the breeds. Right? You know, however, most recently, Bank of America, did you see that? Put out a note to their clients. It was an actual research note that went out to their entire constituency around, we believe that it's true, 50% chance that we're living in a simulation. Not sure that this has to do with investing, but you know, but that actually came out of
50% is good. That's a good.
All right, so
that's reasonable.
It's a fair. I mean, it's a fair question because if B of A is putting out research notes addressing exactly that, that should say somebody's thinking about it.
This was in the Onion.
No, it's the real thing. No, it's a real deal.
It's a real thing.
It happened.
I have the article. I can send it to you.
Yeah.
It's on paper.
The consciousness question is as stupid as thinking that Trump is going to be our president. Okay? It is a non-starter. It is a stupid question. Trump is not going to win. There's never going to be consciousness. Over. Further over. You're like, all this bullshit. It's bullshit.
Unless people don't vote, right?
Go for it. Believe it.
Yeah, people don't
not
vote,
true.
and it's possible.
That's just details. That's just details.
All right, we're going to wind things down. Even though we're just going to keep going, this is awesome, but I think it's going to be late because we'll have so just a few more minutes, and then wherever that basket of those business cards ended up, so you can pass them back up this way. We're going to do a couple of drawings with some cool stuff from Sonic. So just a few more minutes. If you have another question, sorry, you have your hand up.
If, by the way, if you guys wanted more controversy or things that you want to cover, let us know. Like we can talk about anything.
Energy.
What about the this future energy? How do we even go here? That company called WeBuy has just been brought to court because of privacy issues. This is a connected vibrator company.
Oh, yeah, I know that.
Right? And there's privacy issues with regard to them on user behavior. Is that an issue in the future?
I actually know about this.
Connected vibrators, really?
No, you go.
I think our nation has too many lawyers, and we should send them to the radical world and but or to China if we want to compete. Honestly, so for those that I actually sadly know what you're talking about. Am I the only one here?
This knows about
So there's
connected
a company that has a
vibrators.
vibrator. The vibrator is hooked up to the internet, and there was a complaint brought that because they were trying to do some research on their customers, they were recording when the vibrator was being used, what intensity level, and then the vibrator
I
was
would
at
like
maximum
that.
intensity most of the time. This was very useful information for us, so maybe we should have vibrators with higher intensity. So one of the users said, "Oh my gosh, you captured my private information," and therefore I'm suing you. Probably in California, no, not positive.
I'm sure. Why not?
But just a lawsuit being filed doesn't mean anything other than some out-of-work, underemployed lawyer is filing a lawsuit. Because there's so many lawyers that are trying to make money. That's why there's patent trolls. That's why there's so much litigation in our society. A lot of smart people.
There is a privacy gun element to this, it sounds like.
So I will follow with mild but not strong interest the result of the lawsuit.
So I actually,
you know about it.
No, I do know about it. However, I love the way you introduced your answer. There was a complaint brought forth.
I went to law school.
Oh my God.
That's where they train you. They suck their morality and guts out of you. So
This guy said that guy, you know, thing. Like, yeah, no.
It's like a law school exam. You can't tell them you don't know how to be an asshole.
Here's my thing. I probably know a little too much about this particular area. And,
You're fine.
There's a lot, I'm not going to go into the details, but I think once we start to look at robotics, and obviously sex robotics are a thing. They're going to be, I wouldn't say a leading thing, but they're going to be a thing for application of stuff. Kind of like walk a line of normalcy, but not trying to.
Why all of a sudden?
An application of stuff that's very scientific, right?
I think what's going to happen is we're going to start to see, as we build robotics, which are interfacing with humans a lot more intimately, not necessarily sexually, but we talked about brain-computer. I mean, we start to have, access to your thoughts and wills and desires, all sorts of things. Like, that's actually a really interesting privacy law, and we have to start looking at that now before it becomes a problem. Right now, we're just scratching the surface with cars that have to decide whether who lives or who dies in a wreck. Right? Now, once we start to look at, oh, hey, I put this thing in my head, and by the way, it knows that I find this person attractive, and now I can sell you ads all of a sudden in your browser that you're more attractive people like that. Like that, I think we're going to start walking that line sooner rather than later. So we should just start to work on building a framework in place to start to address these things. Right? They're funny and silly now, but they're going to be not funny and very real in 5 years. And so, how do we get ahead of it?
So that the bigger question is where you're going. So there's an app on my phone which allows you to listen to someone for 20 seconds and basically will do an analysis of what their emotions are. There are facial recognition apps which not only to say who you are, but you can look at the micro cues based on what around your eyes, how you're reacting, and tell what your emotions are. There's voice analysis also which will tell you whether you're telling the truth or not. There's a lot coming out very quickly in this area. Obviously, a lot of it goes to national security. So there's better ways other than having granny stripped at the airport security to figure out who's a threat and who isn't, based on asking them some questions and looking at their biometrics. You can look at a television set and you can see a political ad and see if the politician's lying or not in the debate. That's exciting stuff and has great ramifications. And to me, there's always been a trade-off. You give up a portion of your privacy in return for greater safety. When people go into schools, when people go into shopping malls, when people go into theaters and dangerous areas like airports, you do give up a little bit of your privacy in return for greater security. Those are the bigger questions in society. We're dealing with the trade-off between privacy and personal security, which are real as we learn more about human emotion. Look, our call centers today, where you call in, and they are analyzing your voice, and they know how serious you are about canceling your cable or broadband or whatever subscription, and they will up you or give you an offer based on your voice analysis. That is going on today with major companies.
Which
That's
ones?
scary to you?
Which ones?
I am not going to discuss
You know,
I'm sorry, Comcast? I would never say
that's
that.
a common thing. That's a very common thing. You know, I just as a random passion project for fun, I just floated this turd of an idea out to some friends. I was like, you know what I really want to do? I want to do the world's first augmented reality poker game. And I thought it'd be cool to outfit a table with a bunch of HoloLens and have blind cards, all the whatever. Like it'd be AR, it'd be fun, you know, the other things. But then I was like, oh, but I want to have like the HoloLens, like, you know, appeal to the younger generation, like video filters and things like that. And somebody was like, oh, but what if you added the ability for it to look at their tells and start to look at their facial expressions and, you know, this is how they squirm around in their chair and, you know, you can't do it with real-time data, but like, okay, when they've got, Queen King or something like that and they just start to do this, like you can start to read tells and start to do all sorts of other things. It's like, oh, fuck. You know, just as a nerd project, I was, oh, that'd be fucking cool. But then I was like, well, is actually kind of infringing on somebody? If I can actually compute your tell in poker, am I crossing a line?
No.
Right? Well, I mean, it's a fair thing to ask, but somebody would get pissed, especially if I had a table full of
Is
poker
Vegas
players.
doing that now?
What's that?
Is Vegas doing that now?
No, this is the thing I'm going to start. We're almost there. It'll be fun. I don't know. It'll be good.
Hi.
Oh, hey, Steve.
I'm Steve. We're talking about the future tonight, and I think we had a Republican that there is.
No, there's a lot
Yeah,
of
about the back and Jews, you guys, the back and Jews.
There's lots of bodies buried.
One question I'd like to ask, and I have the answer. The future is on its way, and it's all powered, as we say, by enabling technologies, enabling solutions. Where do you see as the major enabling something that will get us to the next generation? What is the most ubiquitous enabling solution?
So I think, like what we've seen in any kind of major enabler is an improvement in the fundamentals, which is connectivity. We still have a last mile problem for just connectivity, which is why you look at companies like Facebook and Google putting drones in the air and things like that. How do we have ubiquity in connectivity, right? So that's certainly like, those are a fundamental, like if once everyone is connected, then we can do some really cool stuff, right? And how we do that, we'll figure that out. From a platformization, we start to look then at the things we wear. Right now, we start to get into the 1%ers. Like, you know, people in India aren't wearing smartwatches. I hate this fucking thing, and whatever. But people are going to start to wear Fitbits and Apple Watches or intelligent things. And so, how do we start to create platforms which connect, all of these different devices? I think we start to look at, your ability to change the masses. You have to start with fundamental building blocks, and it's connectivity, it's power. It's how to power all of these things. We've just seen the problem when you ignore the power problem with Samsung, with them lighting up batteries and all sorts of other things. Like, that's a problem that they've got to address. But when we ignore that one element, like, that's kind of a showstopper, right? So I go back to those kinds of things. So I'm really excited. Honestly, I'm excited about some really interesting new Wi-Fi technologies coming out, some ultra long-range things which will allow our bags to be connected when they're in your hotel room 5 miles away and you're at the convention center at CES and somebody's moved it. Hey, fucking free plug, right?
Yeah.
All right, how's it free? It's like, nothing's free, my friend. No, it's those kinds of things around, how do you enable like those core things. So for me, it's power and connectivity. And then compute is on its own path, right? We're already starting to see Intel start to create some phenomenal new chips which pack density into power efficiency like we've never seen before. NVIDIA is doing some really crazy shit with GPUs, and they're enabling the entire virtual and augmented reality kind of reality that we want, or think we want. So they're on that path. I think we can focus on things. The other building.
Real quick, what can we ignore? What are some of the bullshit out there that we just like ignore?
I think, honestly, I'm over social in a lot of aspects. I understand that it's a big thing, but personally, I didn't latch on to Snapchat. I barely use Instagram. You know, I use Facebook kind of.
You're too old.
I might be, and that's totally cool. I'm alright being an old piece of shit, but I think, you know, it's like if there was another social network that came out, like, all right, man, you got a real serious hurdle to cross, right? So I'm kind of over social, personally. But I don't know about you guys. Are you guys like tired of hearing about? Like for me, it's like from the investment side of things, it's like if I get another like a super but for cats, I'm gonna just punch them. Like it's the thing, right? But we have too many like knockoff businesses, which are just we call it the Uberization of stuff. You know, all right, that's Uber. Obviously, thought it was really cool to have trucking, and you know there was obviously it's Uber but for trucks. All right, that one paid off, right? But I'm kind of over that too, just personally. I think there's probably some interesting things happening in gaming. I think especially as we look towards AR and VR, I'm skeptically optimistic on some of that stuff. I think there's going to be a lot of throwaway. I think I've heard from people who are in positions of power that have AR and VR products, nobody's really expecting a big payoff on this in the immediate future. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't move the needle forward, make some things, and whatever. I think we're probably going to have some. So I think you could probably ignore that. You can ignore the earbuds. You can,
Not sure about the
you can tell the
earbuds.
Apple Pencil
Anyway.
to go fuck off. It's those things. Do you have anything? He's not going to.
All in. There's nothing out there that's like that.
I'm waiting for you to pick your winner.
Let's do it. All right, guys. Gary and Andy